Hey everyone. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a true crime story. Gently. You sit with your back against the headboard, phone warm in your hands, and you can almost smell the rain outside your window, that metallic scent that shows up when the streetlights glaze the pavement in thin gold. The story drifts in slowly, like fog off a river. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you, tiny pinpricks of light across the map. All of us sharing the same hush. Now, turn off the lights, switch on a fan for a little soft noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You take a breath and feel the room lighten as the fan hums. The town is Graybridge, tucked where pine and fog agree to meet. A place you've driven through without remembering, except for the diner sign that still promises pie. You walk those quiet streets in your mind, while the rain flutters the maple leaves, and you feel the way a community feels after someone knocks on the door at 2 a.m. and leaves it open to the night. You are there, second row of pews, a year after the disappearance, when the pastor speaks softly and people avoid the aisle where she used to sit. Her name is Leah Hart, 22. A barista who remembered orders by the color of a person's scarf, who collected ticket stubs in a jar and said, "Someday, I'll make a collage." You see her the way others last saw her. Red windbreaker, headphones looped around her wrists like bracelets, the late bus, sighing as it pulled away. No one knows where she walked after she crossed Alder and Pine. Only that her keycard never beeped her into the student dorm. It became the story that Graybridge told itself when the night pressed too close. A route you can trace with your finger, a space you can't fill with facts. You feel the town's defense mechanisms choose the busy streets and pretend the quiet ones never existed. Mothers start jogging in pairs. Teens stop lingering at the river overlook. The hardware store owner flips the sign earlier because the dark seems to arrive sooner. Police circulate composite sketches that look more like ghosts than people. You click your tongue without noticing. A little rhythm you fall into when you want a different ending than the one you're getting. Over time, the details flatten, but a few stay bright, almost stubborn. A customer remembers Leah laughing. A bus driver remembers the windbreaker reflected in the mirror. A neighbor remembers hearing chimes. No one has chimes on that block. Strange, right? Sport. UTB.gom. We can just a mucher from lace. We can just a mucher from lace. We can just a mucher from lace. And they're repated. In matter for. In their mucher from lace. In their metter from lace. And they're repated. In. That becomes the odd detail people toss around at barbecues and block meetings. Phantom wind chimes in a neighborhood that never bothered with front porches. Some swear it was nothing more than a faulty gate. Others like the romance of a clue that refuses to explain itself. The investigation cycles. Initial surge, widening circles, then the shrinking back. On a forum that survives like a coral reef of usernames, you read old threads, and you can almost taste the stale vending machine coffee people drank while refreshing the page. Theories bloom like mold on bread, quick, fuzzy, and not meant to last. And still, you keep walking Leah's route in your head, crossing at the same angles, listening for the same bus sigh. You tilt your head like you could catch a detail, the rest of them missed. You learn a historical thing that settles like an anchor. In 1986, DNA profiling first helped solve a double murder in the UK. A milestone that changed investigations everywhere. You say this to yourself not to be clever, but to remember that tools change, and that time can be both enemy and ally. You wonder what it means for Graybridge in the years that follow, as technology sharpens like a dentist's new instrument. Less pain, more precision, still a little fear. Years pass in the way, years past birthdays you won't remember. A new grocery store that puts the old one out of business, and posters fading from bulletin boards and then gone altogether. You picture the jar of ticket stubs on a half-painted bookshelf, dusty now, and you feel a small ache for the unfinished collage. In the town, coping becomes performance art, 5Ks with teal ribbons, candlelight vigils when the wind always seems a little too enthusiastic. You stand in the back with your hood up and your hands in your pockets, the way people do when they want to be brave without being noticed. The archive grows accidentally. A school project, a newspaper anniversary feature, and an aunt on Facebook who posts a photo every year with the caption, "Still missing. Somewhere, an evidence box ages." In your imagination, it smells like paper and industrial carpet. You see the label, Hart Lee, then a case number that reads more like a date than a name. You feel the box's weight in your arms because you want to, because weight makes things real. And yet, not all weight is equal. Some memories sink to the bottom. Some bob at the surface and knock against your ankles. There's the oddity of those wind chimes again. You search old property photos and find a note about an estate sale where a rusted set of chimes was listed among miscellaneous yard decor. The address sits 2 blocks off Leah's route. That's something, but it's also nothing. The mind loves patterns, and you remind yourself of another complex truth. Psychologists are still debating the reliability of memory under stress, the way details warp when adrenaline is in the driver's seat, and the way certainty can harden even as accuracy thins. You hold that debate like a smooth stone, turning it in your pocket as you step through the scene again. You listen to the town sounds. You hear the late train dragging its iron tail. You hear the gas station air pump coughing, and the heartfelt laughter of a couple leaving the theater. Somewhere a dog lets out that woof that means everything is fine unless it isn't. You note textures, the sidewalk's grit, the wet wool of your jacket, and the soft electric buzz of the diner sign. It becomes muscle memory, the act of moving through a place with care, because care is the only protest you have left. One autumn, a flood of old feelings returns, triggered by something small. The city installs new streetlights, white and clinical. The change makes shadows act differently. Corners that used to hide now stutter with harsh honesty. You walk and feel exposed, then oddly relieved. You imagine Leah under a different light. Does it shift the story? Maybe the scene would have been witnessed. Maybe nothing changes at all. You learn to live with both possibilities, stacked like plates. You keep coming back to a bus stop bench, with a slat repaired by a mismatched strip of cedar. Someone drew a heart there in black ink, and the rain has turned it into a bruised oval. You sit with your palms flat on the wood and count breaths. You count 15, which became a ritual after you learned that the average person takes about 12 to 20 breaths per minute at rest. You decide to be a little calmer than average, just this once. All the while, Graybridge performs civility. People bake for fundraisers. Detectives give measured quotes that make the paper's front page look committed without promising relief. The chief leans against a brick wall for the camera and says they keep working the case. You want to believe him. You want to believe the box marked Hart doesn't gather dust in the way that dust has ambitions. You learn that everywhere, old cases manage to breathe again when someone touches them, even lightly. A lab recalibrates. A clerk scans a document. A student picks the wrong library shelf and finds a yearbook with a face that looks different now. Then, one ordinary-sounding Tuesday wedges itself into your week like a dream you can't shake. The county announces an audit, mundane, bureaucratic. You barely glance at the headline until the fan's hum grows into a white scarf of sound and your room feels like a station where something arrives right on time. An intern, new and patient, begins rescanning evidence logs to unify formats, line by line. No heroism, just method. You feel a kind of soft respect. Sometimes stories move forward because someone decides to alphabetize. You picture the intern's cursor blinking over Leah's case number, the way a cursor blinks like a heartbeat when it's waiting to be told what to do. A barcode gets read, a plastic bag gets held to the light, and a label that had half peeled years ago gets smoothed down. You don't know this yet, but you sense it, the tremble that rides on ordinary actions, the way floorboards feel under your feet right before the music changes. And here you are, sitting in the dark with your fan and you're quiet, walking the route again, listening for the bus's sigh, for the chime that may or may not have been there. You let the town be what it is. A place that keeps living even when it's missing a piece. In the periphery of your mind, you hold a single firm fact as your calm anchor. Forensic DNA's first high-profile use dates back to the mid-1980s, which means that technology's children are grown now faster, more careful, and increasingly able to read the stories written in microscopic script. You don't know it yet, and that's part of this slow burn comfort, but something is about to shift. A phone will ring on a desk that still has a coffee ring from last winter. A screen will refresh. A name will align beside a date in a way that makes sense and also changes everything. And when it does, you'll feel the air in Graybridge move, as if the town itself takes a deeper, braver breath than usual. Ready for the sound of footsteps in a hallway that leads to a door someone thought would never open. You adjust your pillow, feel the cotton yield, and settle. Outside, the rain writes its cursive across the street. Inside, you steady your voice and your heartbeat and your curiosity. You're ready for the sound the story makes when it crosses from quiet dread to discovery, the soft click of a filing cabinet, the hush before an inbox pings, the way a fan can suddenly sound like wind moving through pine. Because tonight, you're not just listening. You're there, walking. You are the story's witness, and the story is ready to speak. The breath you take now is longer and steadier because the scene tilts from drift to focus. You're at the edge of the records room in the county building, fluorescent lights, the color of skim milk buzzing overhead, and the air smells like old cardboard and a hint of lemon cleaner from a custodial cart that passed an hour ago. You feel the texture of a plastic sleeve under your fingertips, that faint cling that always leaves a whisper of static. You lean in. An intern with patient hands and a hoodie that says Community College rotates a bag so the barcode faces the scanner. The soft beep sounds like a heartbeat smoothed out by sleep. You watch the log update. A number becomes a link opens a chain. Inside the chain, there's a swab collected from Leah's windbreaker cuff, so small you might have mistaken it for lint if the label weren't so controlled and specific. Back then, they weren't sure the fragment meant anything. Now, like a scrap of paper pressed into a book's spine for years, it slides back into daylight with the quiet ceremony of relevance. You move with the case as if it's on a dolly, rolling into the lab wing where the air is drier and the vocabulary lengthens. Machines hum like sheltered hives. You don't need to understand the brand names to grasp the posture, gloved hands, cautious optimism, a tech's shoulders relaxing once the chain of custody form is signed in black ink. You feel your own shoulders react, held at that near-hurt angle of hope you've learned not to trust and also can't resist. The sample goes through a process you once only half understood, but time has taught you the rhythm: extraction, amplification, detection, comparison. You mouth the steps like a counting rhyme, while your fan at home keeps the same slow tempo. Here's a small, firm stepping stone. The FBI's National DNA Database, CODIS, rolled out in the 1,990 seconds and went national by 1998. A lattice that lets local and state profiles reach across borders and touch each other when they match. You let that truth sit on your tongue like a square of dark chocolate complex, a little bitter, but energizing. The lab tech enters the points on the keypad like someone setting a safe. Alleles and loci and numbered constellations that look less like biology and more like a star map. Only a few can read. The profile goes in, then waits. You hold the weight like a book against your chest. You pass the time in a way Graybridge does. Coffee you don't need. A walk past the river that wears a collar of mist. And a stop at the thrift store that never throws anything out. Because one day, somebody will want it. You drift through racks of coats, and that's when something sidesteps into your awareness. A red windbreaker hanging 3 from the end. Not Leah's, not even her size, but the same shade of lighthouse red, the kind that refuses to be background. Tucked in the pocket is a receipt from a long-closed video rental. Someone used the pocket for safekeeping nearly a decade ago. It's nothing, you tell yourself. It's also the kind of nothing your brain collects, like charms. You smooth the nylon and let it go. Back at the lab, the waiting ends in a quiet click of notification. You feel it. Before you know it, your chest caves and lifts at the same time because you've trained for this sound. The match is not a name. Not yet. It's a family resemblance, a distant echo found in a genealogy database where millions of people pinned their pasts to a grid and yanked thread. You pause at the threshold of that world, the one where public and private fence lines thread with gaps. You're aware of the argument that blooms whenever forensic genealogy surfaces. Ethicists, lawyers, and civil libertarians hold the line and the counterline, and scholars still argue whether using broad genealogical databases for law enforcement tilts the scales toward justice or privacy in ways we can't fully control. You keep the debate humming in the backdrop like a second fan. You can hear it without letting it drown out the present. A name doesn't arrive. A family tree does, and you're suddenly a gardener. You prune, you graft, and you scribble notes. A cluster settles around two brothers who grew up one county over, in a ranch house with gravel that pinged under tires and a mailbox with a sun-faded eagle. One brother moved away, the other stayed, poured concrete in the summers, fixed small engines in the winters, and was always described by neighbors with the same three words: quiet, helpful, and private. You can feel the story's temperature drop a notch because private in these tellings carries a second meaning stacked behind it like a shadow. You trace timelines. The night Leah vanished, one of the brothers clocked out from a warehouse on the south edge of town. Payroll records say he left at 10:18 p.m. The bus Leah took coughed away at 10:06. Her walk from the stop to the dorm would have taken 6 minutes at a relaxed pace, 4 if she cut the corner by the pharmacy and didn't wait for the crosswalk. You plot it on a napkin with a pen that's starting to surrender. When you connect the points, you get overlapping windows that don't convict anyone, but they don't rule them out either. You return to the wind chimes nobody owns. That oddity keeps you honest. You visit the house sold the year after Leah's disappearance, the one 2 blocks off her route, because the list from the estate sale keeps chewing at you in a gentle, persistent way. The current owner lets you stand on the porch and look out like you live there. You close your eyes and feel the air. Even without chimes, something makes a thin, high shimmering sound. You turn your head like an animal on alert. It's the streetlight's drawstring whipping very slightly against the pole when the wind pivots north. The note is a near D. You can't prove that to anyone without tuning forks, but you feel it in your teeth. You write it down anyway, not because it solves anything, but because texture is how you remember the world. The detectives, weathered by committees and budgets, pivot with surprising grace into this new lane. They bring on a genealogist who draws charts with pencil sharpener precision and explains genetic distance in metaphors that make you think of coffee diluted with water, and then water added to that water, until taste is a rumor. A second cousin once removed becomes the hinge on which the case might swing. Property records point to a particular garage where nights smell like oil and winter salt. A second line of inquiry mentions an old citation for a taillight. You say both out loud, as if tasting sentences for balance. None of these are proof. All of them are directions. In the middle of the web, the name that keeps vibrating is the one who stayed. You choose not to speak it in your room. You are careful with names, especially this close to the bone. But you do speak the concrete. You speak of the fact that he installed home surveillance cameras 2 years after Leah vanished and never once posted in the neighborhood forum when packages went missing on the block. You say to yourself that cameras don't make anyone guilty. They make some people feel safer and others more seen. You also note his habit of parking by backing into the driveway, like he always wants a clear runway out. The next move is boring, which is how real moves often are. Detectives pull trash, lawful where they are, curbside and within reach, and the bag yields ordinary life. Receipts folded twice, a coupon for washer fluid, and the faintest dusting of dog hair, even though he never walks a dog. In the trash, they find a coffee cup from the diner with a smear of lip, and you feel the way your pulse jostles the edges of your breath. The lab does the dance again. This time, the steps finish in a snap that echoes. The profile's alleles line up with the windbreaker's whisper, statistically powerful, the kind of alignment that makes seasoned techs lean back and exhale without words. Your vision goes a little grainy around the edges, the way it does when you stand up too fast. You picture the detectives exchanging a look that could be mistaken for calm. They know the difference between a thread and a rope. They ask for warrants where they need them. You feel the curve of time here, how years of fog suddenly knit into fiber. You walk outside, and the town looks altered by a degree that only you can register. The diner sign glows a touch brighter. The river seems to exhale. The post office flag flutters like someone just raised it. The arrest happens on a Wednesday morning when frost feathers the edges of windshields. You aren't there in person, but you can feel the rhythm from your room, the way a street gathers to watch without pretending otherwise. Workers in neon vests hold to-go mugs and tilt their heads. A neighbor who does yoga in her garage pauses mid-sun salutation. The man steps out slowly. He wears a jacket the brown of old bread and kneels when told, hands behind his head. His face gone. The particular pale that happens when a person's life changes quicker than weather. You listen for anger in yourself and feel something else first. A wave that tastes like relief salted with grief. Because relief arrives too late to be pure. News hits the town like confetti and ash at the same time. Phones glow in palms. The diner's TV switches from a cooking show to a loop of the yard. Across the screen, the banner reads, "Arrest made in Graybridge cold case," and your ribs tighten as if something is cinched and cut free in the same moment. At the vigil for Leah's birthday, the candles don't gutter as much. People aren't sure how to stand yet. Hope reshapes posture more slowly than despair. You visit the river that night and watch your breath in the cold. The water keeps doing what water does. You remember one of those grounded facts you grip when stories lift you off the floor. In 2018, investigators used genetic genealogy to identify a serial offender in California after decades. And whether that technique should or shouldn't be a default tool became a national conversation carried out in courtrooms and campus lecture halls and comment sections alike. You say that fact because it places Graybridge in a larger map, a constellation of places where old pain found new language. Back in your room, you scroll past statements. The chief thanks partnering agencies and the lab. Leah's mother writes a short paragraph that manages to be both brave and honest about how this is not an ending she'd hoped for, but an ending she asked the universe for anyway. A defense attorney says it's early and urges restraint, which is true and familiar and not cruel. Everyone inches toward a courtroom future you can't see yet. You hold that truth without shaking it to extract more. On your next walk past the bus stop, you observe that nothing looks different unless you know where to look. The repaired cedar slat is still there. The bruised oval of the heart has faded into a smudge. A small plaque shows up on the bench's back. A new metal rectangle with a line that simply reads, "Lee H. loved stories." You press your fingertips to the cold etching and feel how the metal throws your warmth back at you, softly, like it's just reminding you that transfer exists. There's a detail that throws you. Not huge, just odd enough to make you sit on the curb for a minute. When his garage is searched, among the routine's tools nested by size, a calendar with oil change intervals scrawled in tidy numbers, detective's inventory, a shoebox of postcards. Each one is blank on the message side, but addressed to places across the state, as if someone meant to write and never did. The stamps are old, but still valid. A mix of historical figures and national parks. The top card shows a lighthouse on a day so clear the sky is almost white. You can't decide what it means. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's only strange because you want it to be. You accept that uncertainty is not the enemy now. It's the road. You carry the academic questions with you: what justice means, measured against privacy, how communities metabolize fear, whether the memory of a place ever fully updates or if it just layers like paint. A professor on a panel says something that lodges in your mind. Deterrence is a complicated metric here. Scholars still debate whether the visibility of cold case arrests changes the behavior of the few who could be deterred, or only heals the many who needed the world to feel less random. You don't know the answer. And you like the humility of not knowing. You go to the diner and order tea you won't finish. The waitress, who's seen 5 chiefs and 12 menu revamps, says this feels like an exhale she's been holding since the first flyer went up. She slips you an apple pie slice wrapped in wax paper. Because sweetness is a human right, she says. You smile and taste cinnamon that clings to your tongue like a warm quilt. You think of Leah's ticket stubs in their jar. You imagine someone finally making a collage not of receipts and paper, but of the town. River, bench, diner sign, bus mirror, street light, string humming, a near D. On the way home, you catch a reflection of yourself in the laundromat window, hood up, shoulders rounded, a person who just walked through a door that squeaked a little less this time. You stop at the corkboard out front, where missing cat flyers usually live. Pinned there now is a folded sheet with a few lines thanking the people who kept showing up. The ones who laced their shoes and walked routes. The ones who remembered trivial things until those things weren't trivial. And the ones who pushed paper and pushed buttons and pushed conversations forward when they could have closed their laptops and gone to sleep. You tuck the sheet's corner flat so the wind won't worry it loose. You raise your eyes to the sky that looks like brushed steel, and you listen. There is, for the first time in a long stretch, a sound like a town updating. It doesn't ring. It doesn't cheer. It just settles a recalibration you feel in your knees and your throat and the careful way your fingers let go of objects. You return to your room, fan still going, light low enough to smooth edges, but bright enough to track the words you're saying. You picture the evidence box again. It isn't lighter. Evidence doesn't weigh less just because a name is attached. But it does sit differently on the shelf. Label forward. A story whose spine you can see. You take a slower breath, followed by another, as you prepare for the final part of the journey, which asks you to hold both the solved and unsolved simultaneously, similar to how a solved case leaves lingering questions behind, like ripples on water that widen, smooth out, and eventually disappear, while the boat continues moving forward. You wake before dawn, without meaning to. The air feels clean and slightly metallic, the kind of cold that invites silence. Your fan still turns a steady lull, but beneath it, something inside you stirs like a whisper of unfinished business. Outside, Graybridge is draped in early morning hush. The streetlights blink out, one by one, each click like a slow exhale. The story is supposed to be over now, you remind yourself. But it doesn't quite feel finished, does it? You pull on a sweatshirt and walk the block. The frost underfoot crunches like sugar. The bench waits, the plaque gleaming faintly under the dim blush of sunrise. Someone's left a coffee cup on the armrest, half full, still steaming. You wrap your hands around it, feel the fading warmth, and realize how stories linger in the smallest gestures, how even discarded things can hum with memory. Somewhere nearby, a screen door slaps shut. The town is waking up. You think about the trial that hasn't started yet, about how the man whose name you still hesitate to say sits in a cell, wearing clothes that don't belong to him, in a life that's finally catching up. He hasn't confessed. His lawyer has said very little. The evidence will speak louder than he ever will. Still, you find yourself wondering what the truth looks like from his side of the glass. Does guilt age the same way memory does, softening at the edges, reshaping to fit the story we can bear to tell ourselves? As you walk, you remember a fact you once read. In 1992, The Innocence Project began using DNA evidence not only to convict, but also to exonerate the wrongfully accused. It's a double-edged truth, reminding you that justice cuts both ways, revealing and undoing, repairing and wounding. You whisper it to yourself, because every solved case still echoes with the risk of error, the fine thread between science and certainty. You can almost hear Leah's laughter on that thought, a sound you never actually knew but feel anyway, bright, fast, and gone too soon. You pass the old bus stop. The glass panel carries faint scratches with initials carved into the corner. You trace them lightly, the letters half erased by time, maybe initials of kids who once loved each other enough to leave proof. The buses still come, sighing the same sigh, doors hissing open to commuters and students and people who will never know the girl who used to wait here. You stand back, let the air gust over you, and you imagine her reflection merging with yours for just a heartbeat, red jacket, headphones, wind-lifting hair, and then she's gone again. A little ways down the block, the house with the wind chime sits empty now. The new owners moved out after the arrest, said the place felt heavy. You walk past the gate and stop under the porch. The drawstring on the streetlight still flicks against the pole, the faint metallic D that used to haunt you. For a second, you think you hear it match the rhythm of your pulse. Then it's gone. Maybe it never was. You smile softly at your own superstition. Sometimes mystery is just the shape that memory takes when it refuses to close. At the courthouse, weeks later, the town gathers again. Reporters press microphones forward like flowers. You watch from the edge, hands in pockets. The building smells like dust, coffee, and the ghost of raincoats. Inside, they read charges in voices that have learned how to sound both human and official. You think of the box again, Hart, Lee, and how it now sits beside a new file, fresh paper clipped neatly to the corner, a neat signature looping under the date. The machinery of justice moves with the dull rhythm of inevitability. You don't stay long. Justice, you realize, is less a show and more a weight distribution, too much on one side, and the whole thing tips. You step outside before the cameras find you. The air tastes of rust and rain. Down the courthouse steps, a reporter laughs too loudly at something, and the sound cracks the mood like ice underfoot. Across the street, the diner's open sign hums faintly. You head there instead. Inside, everything is the same. The same cracked leather booths. The same jukebox looping soft jazz nobody picks. The waitress nods when she sees you. You look like someone who could use something warm, she says. You nod back. She pours you coffee before you answer. It smells of burnt sugar and kindness. You sit, stirring without drinking, and watch the condensation trace small rivers down the window. Across the street, the courthouse clock ticks toward 10. Every second feels earned. You think about history again, the kind that hides inside ordinary places. Somewhere in this town, old photographs exist of Leah smiling at a county fair, of kids running across the same field where reporters now park their vans. That's how time works, you tell yourself. It folds, creases, and smooths again. Every place is both past and present, layered like old wallpaper. You can almost smell the dust of decades, the chalky sweetness of something unspoken but remembered. You glance at your reflection in the glass, your eyes softer now, your mouth carrying a curve of something between relief and fatigue. You think about how this story will end, not in fireworks or confessions, but in quiet understanding. Truth rarely arrives loud. It lands like snow, soft, covering what it must, revealing what it can. There's one last oddity you never told anyone. The intern who found the evidence barcode changed schools mid-semester, transferring to a program in forensic data management. She said she wanted to learn how stories hide in systems, how truth sometimes waits for patience instead of passion. You think about that often, that sometimes justice doesn't need heroes, just people who show up and stay long enough for the light to catch dust in the air. Evening comes again, the cycle closing. You walk home through the same streets that once felt haunted and now feel what? Not lighter, exactly, but more honest. You stop by the river one last time. The surface glimmers with the reflection of street lamps, trembling slightly. You toss a pebble in, watch the rings expand, overlap, and disappear. You whisper something you don't plan, something that feels both like goodbye and thank you. Back in your room, the fan hums its faithful hum. The rain starts again, soft and even. You lie back, pull the blanket close, and let your thoughts unfurl. The story has ended, but it leaves behind a resonance like wind through an empty street, like the faint chime of something that never truly stopped ringing. Maybe someday we'll know the truth. But for now, sleep well